Java 17 new features. JEP 406 pattern matching for switch. Part 3. Completeness of pattern labels in switch expressions and statements. A switch expression requires that all possible values of the selector expressions are handled in the switch block. This maintains the property that successful evaluation of a switch expression will always yield a value. For normal switch expressions, this is enforced by a fairly straightforward set of extra conditions on the switch block. For pattern switch expressions, we define a notion of type coverage of a switch block. Consider this pattern switch expression. The switch block has only one case label, case string. This matches any value of the selector expression whose type is a subtype of a string. We therefore say that the type coverage of this arrow row is every subtype of a string. This pattern switch expression is incomplete because the type coverage of its switch block does not include the type of the selector expression. Consider this example. The type coverage of this switch block is the union of coverage of its two arrow rows. In other words, the type of coverage is the set of all subtypes of a string and set of all types of integer. But again, the type coverage still does not include the type of the selector expression. So this switch expression is also incomplete and causes compile time error. The type coverage of default is all types. So this example is legal. If the type of the selector expression is sealed class, then the type coverage check can take into account the permits clause of the sealed class to determine whether a switch block is complete. Consider the following example of a sealed interface with 3 permitted subclasses. The compiler can determine that the type coverage of the switch block is the types of A, B, and C. So, the type of the selector expression S is a sealed interface whose permitted subclasses are exactly A, B, and C. This switch block is complete. As a result, no default label is needed. To defend against incomplete separate compilation, the compiler automatically adds a default label whose code throws an incompatible class change error. This label will only be reached if the sealed interface is changed and the switch code is not recompiled. In effect, the compiler hardens your code for you. The requirement for a pattern switch expression to be complete is analogous to the treatment of a switch expression whose selector expression is an enum class, where a default label is not required if there is a clause for every constant of the enum class. The usefulness of having the compiler verify that switch expressions are complete is extremely useful. Rather than keep this check solely for switch expression, we extend this to switch statements also. For backwards compatibility reasons, all existing switch statements will compile unchanged. But if a switch statement uses any of the new features detailed in this video series, then the compiler will check that it is complete. More precisely, completeness is required of switch statements that use pattern or null labels or whose selector's expression is not one of the legacy type. This means that now both switch expressions and switch statements get the benefits of a stricter type checking. For example, making most switch statements complete is simply a matter of adding a simple default clause at the end of the switch body. This leads to clearer and easier to verify code. For example, the following switch statement is not complete and is erroneous. It can be made complete in this way. It may be the case that future compilers of the Java language will emit warnings for legacy switch statements that are not complete.